Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Alan's Cloud. My name is Alan Samsel and today we're going to be talking about VPN. In 2020, VPN is very useful, but there's several different ways that you can use it, and there's several common methods for trying to set up VPN tunnels using clients out there on YouTube today, and I had some issues trying to set some of those up, so I'm going to pass on some information to you guys in this video today, and hopefully that'll help you with some of those common methods. So stick around. So let's get right to it and talk about VPN. I've created some slides here and we're going to step through them. So a couple of the common methods. OpenVPN is a very common protocol for VPN these days. A lot of the different providers actually support it. WireGuard is kind of the new hotness, but a lot of the providers don't provide configuration files for it, and pfSense, one of the major methods for setting up client VPN connections is through the firewall pfSense, and it doesn't natively support it right now. There's a method for using it, but it's not fully complete at this moment. So OpenVPN is what we're going to kind of focus on here today, and I use Invisible Browsing VPN, or IBVPN, but you can see there's several other popular ones here, the PIA or Private Internet Access. Some of these are the focus of some of those other videos on YouTube, and we'll get to some of those use cases and some of the videos that are pretty common. So let's get to the next slide here. So the differences in VPNs, right? So VPNs, you go to a lot of websites these days, and they are touting it as or advertising it for privacy purposes. But you got to understand the differences between privacy versus anonymity here. They say privacy, but that's not really what it is. What the common client providers like NordVPN, Private Internet Access, those folks, what they're really providing is anonymity from certain people out there on the internet. When you want to talk about privacy, versus your internet service provider being able to see everything that you do, every website that you request, those sorts of things. Now you've shifted that point using the client VPN services to that provider. So that's not really private. That's just more anonymous when you're trying to get to, say torrents and certain websites and things like that. They don't really know who you are, but your VPN provider certainly does. In using VPN, you got to understand the difference between a client versus a server. So these, VPN providers that are out there these days, again, PIA, IBVPN that I use, you are setting up a client connection from your machine to their network, and basically, your interaction with the internet becomes, based on the IP address and the network connectivity that they provide to you, right? But you can also create a server connection internal to your network. Several different ways to do it. But this gets back to that privacy versus anonymity piece. If you want privacy, you want to create your own VPN connection, right? So one of the most common ways people, including myself, use pfSense. It's a free open source firewall, and you can create IPsec tunnels in it, and basically that allows you to do mobile connections. If you're out and about, you turn on the VPN connection on your phone, and it goes through whatever Wi-Fi connection you're on, and goes back into your network. That is privacy. That's going from your device through your tunnel behind your firewall and then going out to the greater internet. To me, that's privacy. You can do banking and things like that on that type of connection. But as far as the anonymity piece, that's where your IBVPNs or your NordVPNs and things like that come into play. So over those types of connections, you're not going to want to do banking. You're not going to want to go to your online services and things like that. You want to minimize all of that as much as possible. One of the other common things, we're not going to dig too deep into it as well, but when you're using a VPN service and you're using a client, be aware that your DNS, domain name servers, those connections can be considered leaks of information. If you don't have things configured correctly, you may have your VPN tunnel client connection up to NordVPN or whomever. And still, if you don't have the DNS settings set correctly, every request for a website for name resolution will be seen by your internet service provider. So a very common way to do that is establish your connection, go to this dnsleaktest.com and run the extended test or the simple test and see. And if the response of those name providers, if your regular ISP shows up there when you're in your VPN tunnel is turned on, then you have a DNS leak. So that's a really useful tool to figure that out. And let's see here. Oops, too far. So some important OpenVPN specific client differences, right? TAP versus TUN. So these are configuration settings, and we'll get to them in a minute. I'm going to show you some actual OpenVPN config files that I got from my provider. And I'll show you the differences between these settings, and these things are kind of key to what allowed me to eventually establish the proper connections. I struggled for quite some time with several different methods of establishing an OpenVPN connection, but I eventually did figure it out. And these are the main things. You need to know whether or not your VPN provider has given you config files that use TAP or TUN, and TCP versus UDP. Those are two of the most important things about those config files. Then you need to have those that information readily available when you're trying to create, or follow the how-to videos out there on YouTube or some of the common how-to websites as well. And keep in mind that not all VPN providers are the same. So I think it's really interesting, some of the videos that, and we'll talk about them, that are very common out there. They're using config files from a very specific provider, and that kind of threw me off. But just understand they're not all the same. They don't provide all the same types of files. With this understanding, you might be able to go to them and request the right information, which is what I did with my provider, OVPN. They only provide TAP config files, and I had to go to them and actually request specific TUN files. And as soon as I did that, everything worked, and it's great. Let's go one more here. So this is just a basic graphic straight from Wikipedia that shows you that the difference between a TAP versus a TUN, at the IP layer configuration. A TAP is a data link, and when you use the client software on, say, your home computer, you're usually creating a TAP connection. At least that's the case for the OVPN software that you can run on your PC. But TUN is actually layer 3, and this becomes very important if you're trying to use pfSense and policy-based routing. It actually has to be a TUN configuration in order for pfSense to provide the right options to you following that how-to video. But I'll do a separate video on that one. It's a great video from Tom over at Lawrence Systems, and that configuration in my pfSense firewall has been amazing so far. So let's move on to these OpenVPN config files that you get. It's basically just a text file. What I'm calling out to you here is that in this particular TAP file configuration, and that's very important, you can see that the device here is TAP, right? And I've blown it up so that you can see it a little bit better. And also, this is a UDP connection. Again, those are the most important things about these files that you get from these providers, because the different methods, you're going to need that information, and it's very important. Sometimes it'll look like it'll work, but you'll get errors, and it'll be a little bit strange. But here is the file that I went to my IBVPN provider, and they gave me a specific zip file with all of the different connections that I could potentially do. They have different servers in different countries, and some of those servers have different functions. So you need to make sure that you choose the right one for creating your VPN tunnel with. It's very important. But you can see here the big difference in the device. It's establishing a tunnel connection, a TUN. And one thing that it doesn't show you here is that whether or not this is UDP or TCP. So I tried it in pfSense under their client configuration, and I tried it with TCP and it didn't work. I'm sorry, I tried it UDP and it didn't work. So then I switched over to TCP, and it's been working fine ever since, no errors. So again, the difference in these OpenVPN files and the information that you use is very important. And these two right here, with those in your hip pocket, will get you through the majority of the how-to videos out there. So we're going to go through some of the common and not so common methods for establishing a VPN connection. So probably the most common VPN client method is to use a provider's application. Here on my main machine, Windows 10, the IBVPN, they have their all-in-one software. They also have it on an iOS app for my phone, if I wanted to do that. But again, there's the privacy versus anonymity. If I use it on my phone, the only thing that I would really do through a VPN tunnel there is maybe watch some Netflix, or try to get to the ITV player in the UK or something to that effect. You want to pop out in a different country and use some of those services that are sort of geo-locked. Those are acceptable uses for that. But when you run it on your computer, it tunnels everything. So basically, you're not going to want to do anything important on your main machine while you have that connection up and running. So no banking, and the identity leaks that I'm talking about here are, if you're using your main browser, you have to remember that, you go to certain websites and it auto logs you into Google or into YouTube and things like that. And so those are the things that you kind of have to be concerned about when you're running it on a main machine like that. So again, this has its uses. You turn it on and you're specifically, using BitTorrent to download ISO files or whatever you're out there downloading. But that's a very common method for doing this. That's probably the most common for client connections for VPN. So a sort of advanced VPN client method would be you could set up under VirtualBox on a PC, or VMware on a Mac. You could set up a virtual machine of a Linux, Ubuntu, or whatever the distribution you want to, and have that running for only when you want to make these connections. But that takes up system resources, is potentially always on, or you can turn it on and off as needed. But a lot of people want these always on configurations just because they can. But the advantage of this is that while that virtual machine is up and running, you can establish the connection with the client software inside of there. And your main machine, you can use it for whatever you want. You're surfing, you can go to your important connections, you can do your online banking and such, and only the activity inside of the virtual machine is going through the VPN tunnel. So potentially there, since you're using your browser, normally you shouldn't have any identity leaks unless you're going to certain websites inside of the virtual machine. So that has its advantages. So a more advanced VPN server method, not a client method, but a server method, is what we talked about before. using pfSense, you create an IPsec tunnel for your mobile devices, so for your phone and for your laptops and things like that. The advantages of this, again, are actual privacy. This is set up by you. It creates a tunnel from your device behind your firewall. Now you can go behind your firewall and just go straight to the internet, or in pfSense, you can also give yourself access to your devices and servers and things like that. Or if you're hosting internal websites and things like that, you can give yourself access to the local network as well. It gives you that option. This is the connection that you want to use when you're out there on hotel Wi-Fi or somebody else's Wi-Fi and you don't know who's snooping or doing what with the network traffic that's out there. You establish your network connection back to your home network, and then you can, turn on your banking app on your phone. So either stay on your cellular network, but don't do banking or anything really important over, hotel Wi-Fi. That is just not secure. So that's a pretty advanced method. There's lots of how-to videos out there on how to set that up. It is a bit advanced, so fair warning. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about common VPN gateway methods. The difference is you have a device, either virtual or actual hardware in certain cases, that is providing you a tunnel that is already established, and you just need to somehow attach and route your traffic through that tunnel. So there's several common methods. I call them common methods, but they're technically pretty advanced. So the first one here is using Docker. So the particular image, BinHex, the Arch Deluge VPN. It's very common, very popular. There are several other how-to video guides out there on how to set this up. So some of the benefits of using it this way is that it does support WireGuard as well as OpenVPN. And when you set this up, of course, you have a torrent client that is using the VPN tunnel that gets established, and it has a kill switch installed in it, basically using IP tables, so that if the VPN connection goes down, none of the traffic from the torrent client actually will get out over your regular internet connection. So that's a big concern, and why kill switches come in so handy. So the other benefit of this is that if you have other Docker containers, if you do it the right way, you can route the traffic for those other containers through the Deluge VPN container. Again, pretty advanced stuff there, but lots of other how-to videos on how to do this. We're just talking about the different methods today. And the final thing about this method here is something called Privoxy, which is sort of a separate function, but they have included it in this container all together with these other services. And basically this is a proxy port that is available and will route traffic through the VPN tunnel that gets established here. And that is actually very handy, no matter if it's in this or you install it separately like I have. I actually have a different Privoxy container by itself that is going through my tunnel, because it's such a handy thing to have. With Privoxy, basically I can have my normal browser open and I can go to and use my normal ISP's internet connection, and then I can hit and open up a special tab with a browser extension, and that tab inside of my browser will be routing traffic through the VPN tunnel. So I can at all times either go through my regular ISP connection or through the VPN, and it's super handy on at all times. So that's the first common method. So the second method here for VPN Gateway is actually establishing a virtual machine, not like VirtualBox. Most of these that we're talking about here today, especially this one, is for folks that run a hypervisor. I run Proxmox as a hypervisor to create virtual machines, and that's how I would do it. I tried both this method and the next one, and I couldn't get them to work. And the reasons why I couldn't get them to work were going back to that first slide. My provider was giving me tap instructions, and this method and the next one were all using the TUN connections, and it it's something that they assumed when they were doing it, but really made a difference in whether or not you could get this up and running. So this video from Craft Computing on YouTube, his channel, he's got some great videos out there, and creating this virtual machine to use as a gateway. You set up this virtual machine, it establishes the VPN connection for you, and then when you use other machines, you use that virtual machine's IP addressway as the gateway for other virtual machines, and they will use it for routing their internet traffic. So it's a great video, and I highly encourage you to do it. This is one of the methods if you aren't running a firewall like pfSense. So talking about pfSense, that brings us to method 3, and our final method here, and the one that I particularly use is I have a pfSense firewall. I have a dedicated machine. This is not virtualized. I assume that it would work if it was virtualized, but since I don't do it that way, I don't know that I can answer questions on how to get that working. But for this video, this is from Lawrence Systems. He's got great videos out there. He's kind of my go-to guy for a lot of things out there. But again, I couldn't get this up and working, and I didn't understand that the TAP configurations that my VPN provider gave me just weren't going to cut it. When he talks about the policy-based routing and the interface that actually gets established, and some of the things in his video, they weren't happening for me. Well, that was because I was trying to use TAP, and it actually takes tunnel, the TUN setting, in order to be able to do policy-based routing in pfSense. As soon as I switched over and figured that out and got the configurations from IBVPN from their help desk folks, this has been up and working and established. And it's got a couple of quirks to it. That policy-based routing, though, is awesome. I put specific IP addresses into pfSense and say these are ones that I want to be running through that VPN connection that it establishes, and it just works. Now the DNS is a little bit quirky, and just due to some of the things and the uniqueness of pfSense, this particular video here, or this particular method, is the only one that I will probably make a second video about, because what we've talked about so far in this video, just knowing the difference between TAP and TUN, and UDP versus TCP, will again get you through most of these other configurations, and how-to videos out there. But there is some quirkiness on this particular method, and I'll probably end up doing a separate video on that one, just to show some of those unique things that happen as a result. And but bottom line, it works. So this video, is not going in depth about VPN, but it's all of these different options. But I wanted to cover at least some of those very common methods for establishing VPN connections here in 2020. I think going forward, you probably see some changes. Maybe OpenVPN will kind of take a backseat to WireGuard in the future, but we're not quite there yet. So hopefully this video has struck a chord with some folks. I know I struggled with this for quite some time, so hopefully this helps you out. If it does, please leave me a comment down below and like the video. That really helps. And please subscribe, and you'll get a notification when the pfSense video does come out in the future. Thanks a lot, and you all have a good one.